Podcast, episode 424. Your questions, our answers. Well, hello, fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, your 424th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Dan KB6 Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is your hand questions, our answers. Well, as always, it's our very kind supporters and donors who set up subscriptions for annual monthly donors that help us keep this show advert free, paying our way and keep producing it for you. They show their value in a very unique way, and they turn what they get their enjoyment from the show into a monetary figure, and say they send that our way. You can do the same thing and support the work we do at the ICQ Podcast by visiting icqpodcast.com, selecting one of those options available, or choosing a random one that you've decided yourself, and send that donation our way, and everything we receive goes into producing your show and keeping it advert free for you. So please do consider us this episode. Right now, we're going to join Martin, Dan, Caryn, Edmund, and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including more freedom to innovate and inspecting space junk. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, welcome to this episode's ICQ Podcast, episode 424, and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Going down my list, I have Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU with me. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Martin. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, good to have you. Your side of the pond still, we have Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT. Hi, Caryn.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everyone. It's great to be back.
Great to have you as always. And I'd say you've put some interesting stories in for me. Keep me on my toes. Hi. Also, we have Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
And good to have you, mate. No problems. And last but not least, over in Germany, we have Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, hello, Martin. Hello, crew. Hello, listeners.
Yeah, good to have you all on board. Right, let's have a look at the latest news stories. And I'm going to let you into a secret. We're recording this on Wednesday, the 21st of February. And today, Ofcom announced that the license changes that they've been talking about for a while are going to happen. And some of them happen from today. Edmund, do you want to go first on this one?
Yes, thank you, Martin. So the UK regulator Ofcom published this morning, the 21st of February, a general notice of variation on their website, which has come into effect immediately. Ofcom will be contacting everybody individually in the months ahead, primarily via email. But given that there are roughly 100,000 licenses on issue in the UK, that is going to take a while. So you don't need to wait to receive something directly from Ofcom. The publication on their website means that these changes come in without delay. And this is phase 1 of 3. There are approximately 15 changes. But in my opinion, the 3 most significant ones or of most interest are, in order, number 1, power, number 2, regional secondary locators, and number 3, suffixes. As far as power goes, foundation licensees were hitherto limited to a maximum of 10 watts. That has now increased to 25. Originally, the proposal was for 20 until many people pointed out to Ofcom that quite a lot of commercially available transceivers have 25 watts as a preset power level. So Ofcom were flexible on that one. So it's 25 now on most bands for foundation licensees. For intermediate licensees, it was 50 watts before. It's now 100 watts on most bands. And for full licensees, it was 400 watts. It's now gone up to 1,000 watts, 1 kilowatt on the primary bands, which is virtually all of HF with the notable exception of 30 meters. So do check the band plans for the bands where we're primary users and where we're secondary users. Another nice touch is that aeronautical mobile has become legal for, I think, the first time ever in the UK, but at a limit of 500 milliwatts EIRP, and again, only on primary bands. So I'll be very interested to see who the first person is who goes up in an aeroplane with a half a watt handheld. Number 2, regional secondary locators. Up until today, it was only intermediate licensees that had a letter in their call sign that showed that they were on the air from England, so 2 Echo 0, with the Echo standing presumably for England. If you are a foundation licensee, so Mic 3, Mic 6 or Mic 7, depending on how long you've been licensed, or a full licensee, Mic 0, Mic 1 or Mic 5, or a full licensee whose call sign starts with G for golf, and these days any call sign that starts with golf is a full license, irrespective of the number that follows immediately afterwards. Until now, you would have just had the letter and then the number straight away. So, for example, Golf Echo 0 Alpha Bravo Charlie, or Mike Echo 0 Mike November Golf in my case, would not have been a legal call sign. From today it is, but it's optional. I will stay as Mike 0 Mike November Golf, unless I've got a good reason not to, for a couple of reasons. Number one, Mike Echo 0 involves sending or saying an extra letter, so one extra letter to get lost for the person who's trying to copy a call sign at the other end. And secondly, overseas stations, DX stations, are not going to be familiar with this, or at least not initially anyway. So an overseas station hearing a Golf Echo or a Mike Echo station may well have a reaction somewhere between, at best, confusion, and at worst, unfounded but well-meaning accusations of call sign piracy. So I won't be using this, and I've been listening locally on 2 meters and 4 meters today, where there's been much discussion about this change, and I have not heard anybody local to me anyway who has said that they will be using the Echo. But if you ever hear Mike Echo or Golf Echo call signs on the air, you're not mishearing, and they're not pirates. They are henceforth valid prefixes. The reverse of that is that if you are in any of the nations within the United Kingdom that isn't England, the use of the regional secondary locator becomes optional. So up until today, if I was on the air in Wales, I would be Mike Whiskey 0, Mike November Golf, Mike 0 if I was in Scotland, and so forth. From now onwards, if I go on holiday to any of those countries, I can still stay as Mike 0, Mike November Golf. Now again, old habits die hard, and lots of radio amateurs keep to tradition, I know. I suspect that many stations in Wales, Scotland, and so forth, who've been using their regional secondary locator for years, if not decades, will carry on using it through habit, and especially if they have a call sign that is very well known on the bands with the secondary locator in. So in some ways it's big news, but in other ways it's not. Whether people are in England or in another nation, I think it's likely that they will just carry on as before. The only slight benefit, possibly, if you're into sending and collecting paper QSL cards, is that if you went to Wales, for example, for a week's holiday and made lots of contacts, you would have to send an envelope to the QSL Bureau for the person who dealt with the Mike Whiskey series of call signs to get your cards. They wouldn't get routed automatically to your English call sign. Now, if you did that same thing, you could go to Wales and just use your Mike Zero call sign, thereby bypassing that necessity to send extra envelopes to the Bureau. But I appreciate that's a very niche and specialist thing. On social media, some people have been suggesting that making secondary locators optional means that DXCCs will disappear and everybody in the UK will just be lumped under G. I don't think that's going to happen, because realistically I doubt there are many DXs out there who would be calling for entities to be removed from the DXCC list rather than added. So I'm pretty sure that the entities that we've got now will stay. And last but not least, suffixes. You can now legally put any suffix you like, as long as it's not manifestly offensive, after your call sign. So beforehand you could only be /P for portable, /M for mobile, or /A for alternative. These days you can put whatever you like within reason. I would suggest being careful with that. If you put long suffixes after your call sign, the person you're talking to may well have trouble putting it into their electronic logging program. And be especially careful if you choose to use any suffixes that could be misinterpreted as a country. And the classic example with that, which I think I've given in a recent episode, is that during the International Lighthouse and Lightship weekend, on the third weekend of every August, if somebody spots your lighthouse on the cluster and puts /LH after it to stand for lighthouse, then it doesn't matter which country in the world you're in reality, the cluster will identify you as being in Norway, because Lima Hotel is a valid prefix for Norway that you can put at the end of your call sign. So to summarise, yes, it's big news. These are changes that are, weighty. The entire document comes to 43 pages on the Ofcom website if you want to read the whole thing. So it's significant, obviously, but in terms of the ground really shifting and amateur radio being a completely different beast tomorrow morning as opposed to yesterday morning, this first phase at least could just really be a bit of a storm in a teacup, but a good storm. The end. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. You're obviously very passionate about what's just happened, and I think you're right. Ed, you hold a UK licence as well. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I'll just add to what Edmund's covered, because there are a few other things in there, maybe less interesting than what is covered, but still for some people relevant. Just quickly on the RSL, for the intermediate licence, it is not optional. The 2-something licenses have to keep the RSL because of the ITU naming sequence. The call sign prefix for the intermediate license is 2E, 2W, 2J, 2D, whatever, and that has to stay as that. You can't. The simplest way to put it is 2 does not mean UK. Only 2 with the letter means the country within the UK. So for intermediate licenses that are still using the 2 and will do until the second phase of the changes come in, you still have to use the RSL mandatorily. The call sign suffix provisions that Edmund mentioned as well, that is also actually controlled by an ITU wireless regulation document. But generally what it says is same as what and just said nothing offensive, nothing commercial, but there is actually a document that should be read before you decide to put something on the end of your call sign. The other points that are actually quite positive is for the foundation license. As well as getting more power, they're also now allowed to build and use their own equipment. In other words, they can build their own transmitter and use that. Plus, they now get access to 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. I think it's 2 watts maximum. So extra bands for the foundation license, and also for both the foundation and the intermediate. Previously were not allowed to control radio stations over the internet. Now they can, as of today. So that's the other few things that are in this phase of changes. It'll be interesting to see. These are all things that... Oh, the last one is probably something that would have been good to have the other Martin on to comment on. Maybe he will the next time round when he comes on. The repeater, beacon and gateway licensing has changed as well. And basically simplified, if you have a repeater that runs 5 watts or less, you don't need a separate license anymore. You can use your normal amateur radio license and call sign. Anything above 5 watts, then you have to apply for a correct call sign and a frequency allocation. So that's it. Generally, as again, echoing what Edmund said, nothing that's going to cause the end of amateur radio as we know it overnight or change everything. Some of the later phases coming later in the year may be a little bit more difficult for people because that includes things like only allowing one call sign, voluntarily giving it back, and in the third phase, mandatorily getting the call signs taken away from you. As it presently stands, any new call signs that are issued, as in somebody passes the exam tomorrow, and they're going from, let's say, foundation to intermediate, they will lose their foundation call sign. And later in the year, that rule will be applied to everybody. The other things coming later in the year is easier to get special event station NOVs, and the introduction of the M8 and M9 call sign prefix to replace the 2 call signs. First of all, voluntarily, but I think long term it's going to be mandatory. And the last bit of sugar at the end is at some point you're going to be able to change your call sign every 5 years if you so choose. So almost like a personal call sign you can change. So lots of things in there. It is actually all documented in the February edition of the RADCOM, the RSGB magazine, because all of this information was basically announced by Ofcom back in June or July of last year. Slight changes. December they confirmed they're going to do it, and now they're actually doing it. So good warning has been given. And just read the documents or read the summary from the RSGB or from the Ofcom, because they also do a nice short summary. You don't have to read the full 36-page document. And enjoy getting up there aeronautical mobile with your half-watt EIRP. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all, Ed. Well, Caryn and Dan, but Caryn first. I hold a US license as well as my UK license, which obviously they won't take off me because the other one is in your country. But to me, this seems that we're bringing ourselves into line with other parts of the world, and a lot of what is being given in the UK seems to fit with you guys over in the States. Do you agree, Caryn?
Well, Martin, what I see here and what I like is of course what you have observed, but even as we see these changes taking place in the UK and also down in Australia, that they have changes taking effect as well, but that's more on the assignment of amateur radio licenses. They've had some changes there, including the move to a class license system away from the apparatus license. So yes, I think I think to some degree that is correct. But I must tell you that I listened to these changes, and I wish that the US would do something to more uniformly align our licenses with the rest of the world. And that would be to let even the technician licensees have access to every band, but perhaps at a lower power. It seems the techs are pigeonholed and really restricted terribly on where they can go and what they can do. And I think by doing something like that to the technician license, if they were to change that, there might actually be a greater retention of the techs because last I had read, the greatest drop off in license holders here in the U.S. are among those who have the technician class. So I like change. I like seeing these changes, but gosh, it would be nice if we had more of that going on here as well. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, good points you raised, Karen. And maybe this is the year where all of the licensing regulators are starting to look at what they can do and bring our hobby into a uniform across the world. So that would be nice. Dan, have we left you anything to say on this one?
Well, yeah, there's a little bit for me to say here. First of all, I think that standardization of licensing across the world is kind of a pipe dream. And why? Because different services exist in different countries, which sort of obviate this kind of uniformity. Like, for example, we'll never have a 4-meter band here in the U.S. We just won't. There's something else on there, and so we're not going to get that. So anyway, that's just one point. One of the things I was kind of amused by was this aeronautical mobile thing. And in all this, I've always been interested in the reasons they make these changes. Like, okay, so now they'll say you guys can do aeronautical mobile in the UK, but A, why was it banned in the first place? And B, why only a half watt? As far as I can see here in the U.S., you could, if you wanted to, you could run 1,000 watts from an airplane. So I'm just curious why that's they would restrict it to a half watt.
Well, I don't know the reason for that, Dan, but potentially, I suppose, half watt is a way of testing and making sure that we don't cause too much interference. It'll allow more people to do balloon mobile. Yeah, we're talking about aeronautical mobiles flying, but it could be a balloon, so that you can send a balloon up without having to get an NOV and things like that. But yeah. One last thing that nobody else has covered, but I like from the fact that I do help out at special events and things like that. We're now going to allow members of the public to operate under supervision while we're out and about. So that means that people can actually give our hobby a trial, just like you do in the States on field day and have a go-to station. We can have a station where people can have a go under supervision and control, accepted, but that'll be good.
Okay, so again, the question is, what was the rationale for banning that in the first place, for not allowing that in the first place? I mean, I don't know, but that's just my point of view, is that it's interesting, would be interesting to know the rationale for that.
Yeah, I think this was put in place many, many years ago. Ed, you wanted to comment?
I was going to ask exactly the same as what Dan just asked, which is, why was it banned? Because I remember when I first got my license in 1974, we could do this, or full licensees could do this. You could have an unlicensed operator physically operating the PTT on the microphone and talking into it and tuning the radio, as long as there was somebody there that was qualified, stood behind them to control things. Might have only been club licenses rather than full licenses, but it was possible to do for things like Jota. And it surprised me when I heard that had been stopped. So it's good that it's been put right, in my opinion, put right again, that it's allowed again.
And that makes it even more curiouser that you were allowed to do it, and then at some point, fairly recently, they removed that ability. So anyway, I just think it's
That fairly recently might have been 40 years ago, because I've been
well,
licensed
yeah,
for 50
okay,
years this year.
yeah, okay, well, okay.
Well, I can't be 100% sure because a lot of that was probably before you got your license before me, Ed. But over the years, in at one point in time, the General Post Office, the GPO, used to deal with all the licensing. When I came into the hobby, it was the Radio Authority, and then it moved to another group called Ofcom. So, there have been different controlling bodies, and I think it must have got lost, or one of the controlling bodies decided that we weren't going to have it.
Yeah.
Things we get given and other things get taken away at times, guys.
Yep.
But it could have been lost in one of those changes. Now, a word of warning, a very serious word of warning. When I'm out and about mobile, as of today, Mrs. B can be on the air. Now, she does like to tell everybody she's the boss of ICQ podcast as well. So, just be aware that she might take you to task. And just because she doesn't have a license, and she'll be operating under my supervision, but just because she doesn't have a license doesn't mean she don't know.
Martin, you realize you will be responsible for everything she
That's right.
says.
I'm not taking no
Yes.
responsibility. Oh, dear.
Yeah, and if before June you're here, before the month of June you're here, Delta November 5 Lima Papa on the air, that could be it could be anybody I'm supervising. In Germany they do it a different way. You actually have to have a separate license and call sign. But apart from that, the idea is still the same. The person holding the main call sign is responsible for the other person operating. And so you have to apply for an extra call sign, which, is a bit of extra logistics more than anything else. But, it seems to be silly not that for so long in the UK, supervised operation by a third party was not allowed.
Yeah, true. Well, we've done a lot on this. I'm sure we'll talk more about it as the weeks progress. But this one's gone quite long, guys. So the podcast is going to go long. I know a few of you like long podcasts, so those who do are going to be happy with this one. Next news story: AM broadcast tower still missing. Caryn, you put this one in. There's more to it than just stealing the tower. It's gone. They can't find it.
Well, not only can't they find it, they're not quite sure. Some people are saying they're not quite sure that the story they got is what really happened. So the issue is a bit confused, and even the police cannot figure out what happened to this tower. Just to back up for a moment, in early February, a AM radio station in Jasper, Alabama, apparently the owner discovered the next morning after the alleged theft, oops, the tower's gone. Listeners didn't call in, apparently because they hadn't been on the air for a while. And at the same time, they were still broadcasting on FM, which clearly does not align with what the FCC requires. You must have AM station if you're going to use FM as well. So the search continues for a tower that supposedly was taken down piecemeal and transported. This is not similar to the story about the copper theft that occurred in Oklahoma a while back. In this case, there was really none of that. The tower is gone. There's no trace of it. There's no hint of where the scrap metal was taken. Police are baffled. They're doing their best. The station owner is now on GoFundMe. He's raising money to get a tower back on. And in the meantime, loyal listeners will be able to hear the station online and through an arrangement approved by the FCC. one of the major broadcast entities here in the States, iHeartMedia, has allowed them to get back on the air via FM using high definition radio. So this is a head scratcher. Nobody really knows what happened to the tower, but the big question is, how do you steal a tower? So the plot thickens. Stay tuned, as they say. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, you'd have to do a lot of planning to steal a tower, I would suggest. It wouldn't be an overnight thing. There would be a lot of people involved, I would suggest. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I guess the answer to the question, how do you steal a tower? The answer is one section at a time. But, at first I thought this was a case of someone, sort of stealing his own tower to get the insurance money. But apparently the guy doesn't have any insurance. That's why he's doing this GoFundMe. So I guess that's out, which just makes the whole case curiouser and curiouser. So I don't know. That's about all I have to say about it. It's just a curious thing.
Well, no insurance. I suppose you could make some money selling off your tower to a scrap metal dealer, couldn't you?
Yeah, but it can't be that much.
Yeah. I'm just not saying he did. Just getting curious, that's all. Edmund, how would you dispose of a tower if you had to? Or what would you thought on this one?
I'd guess it one piece at a time, and it wouldn't cost me a dime, and you'd know it was me when I carried it through your town, to almost quote Johnny Cash. There's nothing I can say about this, Martin, other than that my mind completely boggles.
Oh, yeah, it's an interesting one that it's gone missing, when something as large as that would take a hell of a lot of planning to get rid of it, I would have thought. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm just wondering if anybody was at Hamcation, whether they saw somebody trying to sell a 200-foot radio tower. How on earth would you transport it?
I had a few friends that went to Hamcation, and none of them gave that report. So
No. Oh dear, 200 foot. I mean, it's not as if it was a small one. I mean, this is a big tower, and it's, the earlier report about the stealing of copper, the tower was basically they cut the guys to take the copper in the earlier story, but this one, that the whole tower disappears overnight. It doesn't seem right. We'll watch this page, as they say. It's hopefully we'll hear more about it.
Well, as long as they don't try and convince me it was stolen by aliens, I think I'll be okay on that one. But hey, we'll find out more as I say time goes on. So interesting story, Caryn, you put forward on this one. It does add a bit more meat onto the bones on a previous discussion we had.
I think it would be funny, Martin, if indeed it was it was sold at the flea market at Hamcation. Just one tower, one vendor, one product being sold.
Yeah, well, Frank and Bill were telling me that there is one dealer that says he will buy anything, and at one point in time bought a goat in part exchange. So I think they were jesting, but you never know. It's one of those things. As long as they don't try and arrest me for it when I turn up in the States as a tower mastermind. There you go. Right, move to our next story. A satellite designed to inspect space junk has just been put into orbit, which is great news, because we often talk about all these satellites up there and what needs to be done and all the space junk. Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, this is we like space stories generally, and we like to cover when there's a new amateur satellite or whatever up there. But we've repeatedly said our concern is all the space junk, and this is out of Japan Space Agency, JAXA. They're actually got a spacecraft up there now that actually is going to go around and look at space junk and try to have an idea what might be possible. This is not a outer space rubbish truck yet. They're going to go and look and try and rendezvous with a rocket upper stage from a Japanese rocket H2A that's flying around up there. But the longer term, once they can actually work out where all the debris is and the junk is, the longer stage thing is to actually try and then work out what's the best way to get rid of this stuff, whether you deorbit it or or what you do with it. The last thing you want to do is make it to try and destroy it and make it from one piece into 1,000 pieces. That makes it even worse for everything. But it's great somebody or some nation, in this case Japan, are actually starting to do something in this direction to at least try and gather ideas by what they can see up there with the junk that they're trying to handle. It's up for a few months, and it needs to assess the condition, it says here, of various of this rocket stage. And it'd be interesting to see what they then decide to do. I presume there'll be some other follow-up spacecraft that they're designing to go and take care of their old rubbish. And, if Japan's doing this, it's probably time for every other nation that can put stuff in space to do something similar. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, that's to say, it's good that somebody's starting this. Caryn, we often talk about satellites and the space rubbish up there. This has got to be good in you. I'm sure you looked and thought this has got to be good.
I think it's great. I think of it as kind of the big cleanup machine up there. I think of the robo vacuums, so popular in many people's homes now, going about and cleaning things up while we rest confidently that everything will be cleaned up nicely. At the risk of sounding a little odd about this, though, my only remaining question about this is how do we know that this satellite won't end up as space junk itself? That would be my only question when I saw this. I said, yeah, what happens when it's done? We got more space junk. So that's really my final thought. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I would have thought that because now you're supposed to deorbit satellites, I would hope this one would deorbit when it's finished its lifetime. So, I understand your concerns. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I kind of agree here with Caryn. I don't see in this story anyway any capability of it not becoming junk itself. I mean, I suppose maybe, and I was going to try and look this up, that maybe there's a plan for it to deorbit itself once it's determined whatever it's trying to determine about this piece of space junk. But yeah, otherwise it's going to just be up there itself.
Yeah, we don't want more space junk. Edmund, I know you're, you and I are not particularly good at doing satellite amateur radio, although we've had a good go at it. But what's your thoughts?
Well, the comment that Caryn made was exactly what was running through my mind as well. But leaving that aside about this device becoming a space junk itself, I hope if it is successful that we can produce quite a lot of these, because there's so much junk up there. By coincidence, on the morning of the day that we are doing this recording, one of the headlines on Radio 4 this morning was that a satellite was going to crash back to Earth and hopefully burn up for the most part in the atmosphere. That was Echo Romeo Sierra 2, the European remote sensing satellite, and I gather that has now crashed down in the ocean somewhere. But there's so much junk up there, we need to do something, and if this device or something like it is the first step on the road to cleaning up the mess we've made in decades gone by, then I'm all for it, Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you. And while you were saying that, I'm suddenly thinking, if they deorbit them into the ocean, probably the best place to go, but we're still going to pick up pollution from it, but they do orbit them in the ocean. I hope it's somewhere where ships don't go, because you can imagine a ship travelling down quite happily, suddenly a satellite blasts the hell out of it.
Now, Martin, there is an allocated space in the South Atlantic specifically for this, and the ships and everything know about that, so it's actually defined in international treaty, and it's one of the deepest parts of the South Atlantic. So, I mean, the only thing, you're right, this story doesn't actually say what happens to Adras J when it's finished, but it does say that it's a spacecraft, not that it's a satellite or something. So that suggests to me, and the fact it's going to rendezvous with the junk means that it's got its own power on board to be able to be steered to where it needs to go. So most logically, once it's finished its mission, it should then be able to be steered back through the atmosphere down into the ocean in the South Atlantic.
Yeah, that's okay, Ed, what you just said about the South Atlantic. All the time that you have control over the satellite, this particular one that re-entered today, the wording on the news bulletin this morning on Radio 4 was words to the effect of, experts have no idea where on the planet this might crash. However, they feel it is more likely that it will burn up over water rather than land, simply because a far greater percentage of the Earth's surface is covered by water than land. But that's not exactly reassuring, is it?
Well, that doesn't sound like an expert. That's your common man could tell you that. So yeah, that's not reassuring. So obviously that was not a controlled re-entry.
Let's see what happens on this one. Let's hope it's positive.
At least they're trying.
Yeah, I agree with you. Right, the next news story. I wasn't sure whether this was posturing, but I am told that this is probably the biggest news story of the day for the States people, that Senator Roger Whittaker and Richard Blumenthal introduced S.3690 to eliminate private land use restrictions on amateur radio. Dan, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. So the two guys actually are, the first guy's name is Roger Wicker of Mississippi. And how this differs from the other bills we've talked about in the past on ICQ podcast is this one is being introduced kind of in the middle of a term rather than at the end of a term. At the end of the term, it has really little to no chance of passing. This bill being introduced at this point, it probably still won't pass, but it has a much better chance. And I'll point this out. The two sponsors here, Wicker and Blumenthal, one is a member of the Republican Party, one is a member of the Democratic Party. So it has some bipartisan sponsorship, which is always a good thing here. So this is very hopeful. It's really very hopeful. Wicker seems to be one of the, I hate to say more progressive Republicans, but he's got his eye on. Let's put it this way: he's one of the more practical Republicans, and you'd expect something like this out of a Democrat here. But anyway, the point being here is it is bipartisan. It's being introduced in the middle of a term, and this is only a good thing for ham radio.
It certainly sounds it, and if you've got multiple parties backing this, that sounds like it may actually happen. Caryn, what's your thoughts?
Well, again, first of all, the fact that it is bipartisan is a good sign. But as Dan wisely pointed out, the chance of this passing is not great. Certainly not going to be passed immediately, and probably not going to be passed without a lot of tweaks to the language and a lot of compromises, I suspect, because this is politics. But this is a very major issue. Lots of developments in the U.S., especially the newer ones, have homeowner organizations, homeowner associations that, of course, not only manage the property, but make the rules. And not many of them are amateur radio friendly in that people wanting antennas are actually now driving the market in stealth antennas. A lot of people now with flagpoles and curious looking palm trees in various places where you normally don't see palm trees or flagpoles. So, what we're starting to see, and this may be the direction in which things will go, what you're starting to see is attempts in the individual states to produce these kinds of laws instead that protect amateurs. And at the time, Newsline had carried this story. There was a second story that we paired with it, which immediately followed it. This is out of South Carolina, and at the state capitol there in South Carolina, lawmakers were introducing a very similar bill. And of course, this would only protect the hams in the state. But again, it would recognize the emergency communications value of amateur radio operators and see them as, protectors of the citizenry and people you want to be able to call upon in a crisis. So we may end up here in the States, while everybody is pretty much scratching their head and wondering what to do next on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., the individual states will be, I suspect, taking action and passing their own protections. Ultimately, and sadly, what this might produce is a kind of a patchwork quilt of response around the U.S., as certain states will have this protection and certain states, hams, will not have this protection. Not unlike the individual laws that were passed governing the use of cell phones, mobile communications, getting an exemption for ham radio operators when cell phones were prohibited by motorists. So that would be not prohibited. I mean, hands-free was required. So it doesn't make for a very uniform way of tackling the problem. But my guess is this is going to be handled on a state-by-state basis rather than on a broad brush of being something coming out of Washington, D.C. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, you make some interesting points there. I suppose if I was a senator in one state that's just got this put through and lots of hams have voted for him and everything, or him or her, and lots of people are really pleased about it. If I was a senator in a neighbouring state, I'd be thinking, boy, I think I might like some of this extra voting power, people voting for me by me being a good guy. So it may just be that it will ripple. If it only happens, if it starts slowly, and others boycott it at the start, it might actually just ripple through the states and you have it within a few years based on the fact that that's what the public want. So, yeah. Edmund, I think you and I would be rather screwed, wouldn't we, if they suddenly said to us we weren't allowed to put antennas up in our gardens, wouldn't they?
Yes, and something that we have in the United Kingdom are what are known as NIMBYs, which stands for Not in My Backyard. And I assume people like that exist in the US as well. So I just hope that if this legislation were to be introduced, be that nationwide or on a state-by-state basis, that is it the HOAs, is that the right expression?
Yes.
That the HOAs or their members would accept it with good grace and not try to subvert it by bringing up sort of spurious technicalities under other rules and legislations. For example, not too far away from where I'm sitting now, there is an offshore wind farm, and before that was built, when it was out at the consultation stage, there were some people locally who were just dead set against it, purely on the grounds that they thought it didn't look very nice and they wanted to be able to look out to sea and not see wind turbines. The fact that there was plenty of other sea that they could observe if they moved their heads further to the left or further to the right, that didn't come into it. They didn't want turbines out there because they didn't look nice, but they wouldn't say that. So they put in objections to the local council on all kinds of grounds without actually saying we don't want this because it won't look nice. And all of those were overruled or found to be without merit. So their final, what's the word I'm looking for? Their final approach was to complain on the grounds that there was some kind of rare and protected wildlife or birds that was specific to that part of the English Channel, and that if the turbines were built, then when they were going round, every time the blade revolved, it would chop off the head of one of these birds that would be passing at the time, which was clearly not true and was clearly stupid. But they pursued it as a serious form of, serious quote unquote, form of objection. So I just hope that HOAs don't go down that kind of route, if you see what I mean. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think all we can do is hope on this one, and I hope it all works out for the guys in the States. Ed, last words on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got a lot to add. I was chuckling away when you said Roger Whittaker. I thought, he's changed his profession. Anyway, yeah, same things. There's the old statement, an Englishman's house is his castle, but that's changing as well, I know, in the UK. And there's certain people come up with all kinds of stupid rules and regulations to tell other people what to do without any real basis. And even if they never get through, like you were saying, with opposing the wind farm in the English Channel there, the effort and the extra cost it's caused by those people trying to block it, really they should be made to pay for what the extra cost they've caused. But of course that'll never happen. In my case, I'm not a big fan of wind farms, I'll be honest about that, but I'd rather see them in the sea than on the land because of I'll be honest, they're unsightly. And apart from the fact they also radiate bad RF interference at times as well when you're out portable. So looking at it from an amateur radio point of view. Okay, good luck to the people getting this bill through the Senate. And it obviously would make a lot more sense if it was a federal bill rather than all the individual states. But whatever works, I think, is the answer to this one. I know the ARRL and others have been working towards this for many years now, so hopefully they'll get some fruit from their efforts. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I remember talking to the president of the ARRL, must be over 10 years ago in Friedrichshafen about this, and this is about the most positive I've seen it get so far. So that's good news. That's good news. Right, move to our next news story. Caryn, you put this one in, but I do like it. The headline is, "You must be joking. Amateur radio gets downright silly." So have they been talking to me again, Caryn?
I think this particular net has your name on it, Martin. I think you're going to have to check in at least once. This is probably one of the more unique nets that's out there. You know how people pass traffic, and it's important to pass traffic. Well, these guys are going to be passing some puns. The whole net is devoted to making one another groan with really bad humor. Now you might say, is this really the highest and best use of amateur radio to engage in puns? I mean, there are no good puns. There are only bad puns. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We're supposed to have fun in addition to getting down to the serious business of doing what we do on the air. And why not? Why not? Fellow Daryl Stout has been writing us about this at Newsline and indicated to me that he had this project in the works for a while. He just wanted to get approval from the QuadNet array. for folks on DMR, Fusion, everybody whose system is served by the QuadNet array. And they're going to be starting in another week or so. He gave the time not in UTC, which really would be easier because a lot of our countries are going to be having a time change very soon. Saturday, the 2nd of March, that would be 1 p.m. Pacific and 4 p.m. Eastern time. So that's actually before the time change. He did not indicate if they're going to make an adjustment after that. I assume they're going to stick to the same time every week, even after the time change. It's worth a couple of laughs. I think it challenges the mind to be clever. It's silly, so what? Let it be silly. I think it's a great idea. Hey, maybe I'll check in. You never know. They might throw me out, but I might try and check in anyway, at least to see what it's like. And I encourage everybody to give it a try. Okay, Martin, back to you.
Yeah, well, as I say, the hobby has to be fun. We sometimes do fun things. This isn't going to hurt anybody. Maybe it's not technical, but if it gets people out using their radios and having a bit of fun and putting a bit of international friendship in, which I believe is also part of our hobby, then I can't see an issue with it. Edmund, a bit far away for us to get involved, even though we do DM. You and I do DMR and Fusion. But what do you think?
Well, I won't be getting involved, mainly because I don't know any puns. I mean, as far as using amateur radio for this goes, well, you are allowed to make remarks of a personal nature, aren't you? So if telling puns is your thing, why not? But I must confess, Martin, it doesn't instantly reach out and grab me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. But it's horses for courses. Not every amateur will agree or along those lines. Ed, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, just to make it clear to the listeners, this is not an on-air net. This is on the internet, so it's a talk group, or what we're going to call it, a conference call. So the rules and regulations about what can be said on air don't apply. Okay, you could say, yes, you're using radio between your handy talkie and the hotspot 3 meters away or whatever. But realistically, it's not like a HF band's net. It's actually a net on a conferencing system. So there's a bit more freedom there, what can go on. I mean, like we're doing now, recording this podcast, we're doing it through the internet. We've got international communication happening between the people here. So, yeah, why not? If the Queen of Puns, as we know, Caryn, takes part, it'll be interesting to see how they stand up to her various puns. And you'll have seen from a lot of her titles to the news items over the last time that she's been with ICQ podcast. And, of course, in AR Newsline as well. So, yeah, puns and puns for puns' sake. No, that doesn't seem to work, does it? So I think, like Edmund, I'm not really a person that can spin a pun very well. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, as I say, we can't all be good at everything. Dan, I was sitting there thinking while the others were talking, you could have a laugh. You could send a pun via Morse. That would really screw these guys' heads, wouldn't it?
Well, there you go. That's one thing. So I've been sitting here as the other commentators have been talking, and I typed in ham radio pun into Google Gemini a couple of times, and it didn't come up with really anything good except this one. What did the ham radio operator say when his antenna blew down? I guess I'm grounded for a while.
Well, there you go.
Ow.
That's my contribution.
Oh, well, but it's fun. I mean, okay, it was not the best I've heard, but it brought a smile to my face.
I presume, Dan, that was using an AI engine of some sort. AI in this case being artificial idiotry.
Yeah, Google Gemini.
All right. Well, I haven't played with that one.
Oh, actually, I can think of one.
Go on.
I can think of one. 2 dipoles got married. The wedding itself wasn't great, but the reception was fantastic.
Well, there you go.
Okay. Okay. You will be expected on March 1st to check in.
There you go. There you go. So a bit of fun, guys. That's a bit of fun. Moving to our last news story. Another one of yours, Caryn, and I like this. Californian Girl Scouts get spaced out. Now, that doesn't mean to say they've been on the illegal substances. What it means is that they have gone on the air to talk to the ISS, isn't it?
Yes, this is correct. No puns involved in this case. These girls accomplished something that right now only a handful, to my knowledge, of contacts through ARIS have been made as direct contacts. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about how a high school in Erie, Pennsylvania, the students there created a station and spoke directly to the ISS through an arranged contact through the ARIS organization. And ARIS is very pleased when it sees students learning how to do this and actually building the hardware, learning the science, and making the contacts. And these Girl Scouts have done the same thing, except in their case, they didn't build the station. But what they did do was they helped organize and design the project, and in the process, learned a lot about the science behind RF, and they learned a lot about space as well. So it falls under the same category of really being STEM education for them, and this being the culmination of it. So this is really neat. It's something, when all of us were students, I mean, this was not possible, but honestly, this makes it real. This really brings it home. And I think for students of a certain age, these are teenagers, it will have a great impression on them, and it will show them the possibilities of what lies ahead once they get a little further along in their education. So bravo, girls.
Yeah, bravo is the right word, because this is exciting stuff, and I just wish that we'd have done things like this when I was at school. But the technology wasn't around then, but it don't mean to say I don't appreciate it now. Edmund, I'm going to let you go second on this one again. Great work by youngsters, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not really anything much I can say beyond that, Martin, other than well done.
Yeah, well, at least they are actually doing something. And there's a lot of criticism of youngsters these days if they don't do anything. And then you see an article like this and you go, well, our youngsters actually will do things. And hopefully they've got a mentor that will guide them in the right direction. And it looks like it has happened. So good one. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, I like the fact that ARIS is stretching out to include non-school groups. In this case, it's a group of Girl Scouts. In another case, it may be a contact from a museum somewhere. So I think that's a good idea. Also, I'm just sitting here thinking about it. Maybe they would accept proposals from groups that even cater to adults, right? I mean, adults like space too, right? And it would be good PR for them. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just throw that out and plant a seed in their thoughts about who to accept as far as doing these ISS contacts.
Yeah, I think you're right there, because if you could go to other groups of people that have an interest as well as youngsters, then that's got to be a bonus, because the whole society, you can't just approach one group of society and think it's going to propagate through the whole lot. At different age levels, you're entering into families at different age levels, and the information is often better sent down by one member of the family telling another member of the family. So, yeah, I think what you're saying is good. Maybe we do need to approach different ages.
like maybe at a Star Trek convention or something like that.
Yeah, something that has some idea about space, or even if it's a Star Trek convention, it's a bit of fun. And our hobby should be fun, because otherwise we won't attract anybody. So, yeah, agree with you. Right. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, first of all, this could be a good match for your smart library projects, as in, if you could line up a contact from a library, from probably a larger library, where you're doing the smart amateur radio thing anyway. That would actually be an interesting approach, because then you'll get a lot of publicity from the local press, and obviously the local council will be happy and everything else. So maybe, and again, a different age group. Why not? It's space is of interest to everybody, and the ISS certainly. Just a bit of background on ARIS and how this usually used to happen. It used to be that at the start, you'd get a group of amateurs, often a local radio club, would go along to a school, set up the gear, and then try for a pass and get them the students talking to the astronauts. But this is a little bit hit and miss. So after a while, I think there's about a dozen stations around the world which are set up specifically, amateur radio stations set up specifically to communicate with ARIS, with the ISS, with large antennas and know the protocols and they have also a very good internet and telephone line connections. And the ARIS organisation then use what they call a telebridge, which is taken to the school that's going to do the contact, and that then goes to whichever station is most appropriate around the world, time-wise, etc. And they do it effectively, again, like a teleconferencing call through to that station and then up to the ISS and back down and around the other way. Now we're seeing, as you point out, more and more the situations where not only is amateur radio being set up locally at the school, but also the students are getting involved in learning amateur radio, setting up the system with help from skilled hams. But it's almost coming full circle, with the exception that it's not an external group that's coming in and doing everything. Rather, the external group's coming in and training the students to do the work. So this I find is a good direction that it's going, and should be applauded. Back to you, Martin.
I certainly agree with you, Ed. Certainly agree with you. Let's the more somebody does to get this working themselves, the more they learn, rather than being just said, stand in front of this microphone and ask a question. So, yeah, agree with you totally. Well, that completes our news stories for today. We're running long, which is good because some of you enjoy it when we do. Let's find out what the guys have been up to since we last spoke. Ladies first, Caryn.
Oh boy. Well, I've been busy. I've been busy. In fact, I got back from my POTA activation just in time to get ready for our roundtable, and that was fun. Doing more and more POTA, even though it's parking lots on the air for the moment because of the PLOTA, because it is still pretty cold in this part of the world. We almost, Ed, shall I spill the beans on this? We almost had a for real SOTA to POTA contact, but it did not happen. Ed was out on the summit, and I was at Trailview State Park here in New York. And we were hoping. The fates were not kind. The band was not kind. We did the best we could. I actually learned how to use my 891 on sideband because all I've been doing is CW. So I've never really bothered to use it on sideband. It works well. Surprise, surprise. I love that radio. But as soon as we both realized it was not to be, I went back to getting my contacts on CW. So 20 meters didn't do it. 10 meters might have been able to, but we will try again one day. So I've been doing a bit of POTA and not too much else, because usually that involves spending money. So we're trying not to do that. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. And yeah, at least if you and Ed try again, it gives you an extra avenue to try when you're out operating, which is always great fun. So yeah, I'm glad that worked for you. Well, didn't quite work for you, but you're certainly going to try again. And sounds like you've had a lot of fun. Dan, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Well, I actually did get out to do a POTA. I got out to last week before last. The temperature here got up to 55 or so, and I got out and did an activation, made 30 contacts, and just was very nice. The weather's supposed to be pretty nice tomorrow too, so I'm hoping maybe I'll get out and do one tomorrow as well. But most of my time last month or so has been taken up with this project I've got. I'm building a keyer, which is nothing new, right? But this one doesn't use an Arduino; it uses a Raspberry Pi Pico. And in addition to using the Pico, I'm trying to program it in MicroPython. So this was a sort of a development from a project published in the May 2023 QST. That's where I got the hardware from. And for the project in the May issue, the author used BASIC, if you can believe it, to program the keyer functions. I thought MicroPython might be a little bit better choice, and I'm slogging away at it. I got the basic keyer functionality working, but now I'm working on how to implement the command functionality. For example, the K3NG keyer, which I'm taking as my model here, when you press the what I call the command button and then send an E, it tells you what speed it's set to. So that's that's a whole sequence of events there, right? Press the command button, look for a character because different characters will make it do different things, and then respond with the appropriate response. So all that's more complicated than just getting it to send dits and das. And so that's where I'm at now. I'm kind of at a little bit of a roadblock because I'm trying to figure out best way to do that. And if anybody knows MicroPython, maybe they can get a hold of me and give me some tips here. But anyway, that's what I've been doing. It's been fun. It's been fun learning MicroPython and finally getting to use the Raspberry Pi Pico, and that's that.
All right. Well, Chris Howard gave me a Micro Pico 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I'm sorry, Chris, I haven't done anything with it just yet, but certainly will do and give it a good try. But Dan, if you're anything like me, take a pencil and a notepad to bed, leave it on your bedside table, because 2 o'clock in the morning, you will wake up and you will know how to do what's been bugging you for days because it comes. The number of times I've had it, I've been working on a project or need to do something and I'm really desperate and I can't think how to do it. And suddenly, bang, early hours of the morning, I wake up and I write it down on a pad and get up the next morning and do it. It happens. So it sounds like you're having fun anyway, and that's a good one.
Yeah.
Right, Edmund, what have you been up to? I think the last time I saw you, we were at a rally.
We were, yes. I enjoyed coming to the Canvey Island rally in Essex, organised by the South Essex Amateur Radio Society. And it was very well attended. I know that a few photographs popped up on social media, which gave the impression that there weren't many people there, but the rally was split across 2 halls, and the photos that some listeners may have seen on Facebook were taken after the rally had been going for a little while. So it's a classic example of how, yes, a picture can tell 1,000 words, but also it can be misleading because all you see is what is in front of the camera at the moment the photo was taken, it doesn't speak of what was going on an hour, 2 hours previously, or what you would have seen if the person taking the photo had swung the camera one way or the other. So, don't let that put you off. It's a well-attended rally and be well worth going next year. I got myself a bargain. I got myself a nice bench Morse key, which I'm hoping will act as motivation to me to pull my finger out and actually practice a bit more. But apart from that, I've not actually been on the air transmitting. I've been doing a lot of listening, but I haven't worked anybody for ages. And the next thing coming up, I think, is the Dover rally in Kent towards the end of March. I can't remember the exact date. But other than that, Martin, not much going on at this end at the moment.
Yeah, no problems at all. Well, your bench paddle looked very, very good, I must admit. I came away from the rally and I said, you know what? I was working for the podcast effectively all the time and I didn't buy anything. And Mrs. B looked me straight in the eye and she said, well, I had your wallet and you bought us lunch or breakfast, rather. You bought us breakfast. So that proved I did buy something at the rally. But great rally that one was. Ed, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, a couple of things radio related. One I can blame you for. You did a feature some weeks ago on the Quansheng UVK5 handy talkie that everybody's raving about around the internet. And I decided at the end to say, oh, come on, I suppose I might as well get one and see what I can do with it. Cost me €19.60, so less than €20 from China, of course, including shipping and everything else. Got here in about 10 days, actually, which wasn't bad. And I've applied the updated firmware to it so that rather than just being yet another FM handy talkie for 270 centimetres, it also can do double sideband, not single sideband, double sideband CW and AM transmit and receive on single sideband AM, FM, CW, etc. And they've packed so many features into this firmware, this new firmware for it, that I'm fighting my way through all the instructions, trying to learn how to do things, and it's taken a while. In any case, there's a couple of other amateurs who got them as well, and what I'm hoping for actually is I'm not interested in transmitting outside of 2 meters or 70 centimeters because the filters won't let you do that anyway. But I want to use it for sideband on 2 meters because as of June, we will have a new license class in Germany, which will be the N, class N. And that's basically the equivalent of the US technician or the foundation license in Australia or the UK, but with a limited number of bands like the technician in the US. So they will get access to 2 meters, 70 sems, and 10 meters. Hopefully that's going to increase the activity on 2 meters and 70 sems. Well, that's my hope anyway. So as I don't any longer have any multi-mode gear for 2 meters or 70. This was a cheap way of doing that. So we'll see how we go with that. Apart from that, as I think I mentioned on the last show, I'm very happy to report that the wire beam, the 2-element wire beam design is working very well. It's now been out on 3 SOTA activations and 1 HEMA activation. And indeed, it seems to be living up to what the theoretical gains are. It's about, between 5 and 6 dBi gain, and front to back, probably about 3 or 4 dB only. So it's not like a big multi-element beam, but for portable usage, I've got it now down to a nice light package, and it does both 20 meters and 10 meters. And indeed, that's what I was using today from a SOTA Summit to try and get a contact with Caryn. I could just hear it in the noise, but then I got somebody else come up close to frequency. So that was basically the end of that. I was on 20 metres. Prior to that, I'd been on 10 metres and worked down into South Africa, worked all around Europe, hearing stations from the US, but didn't manage to work any, unfortunately. And so radio out on the mountains. Today was a nice day. The Alps were expecting snow again on Sunday and Monday, so winter isn't quite over here yet, but as soon as we get into spring, this wire beam's going to be out doing some more tests and changes on it. And anybody that's interested, it's all published now up on my website, so dd5lp.com, and look for equipment antennas and you'll find it in there. So, a few things been going on, Martin. Back to you, mate.
Yeah, no problem. So it sounds like you've been having fun, which is the important thing. Now, I actually own I bought a UVK5, and I paid too much money for mine, but I still think it was worth it. I probably mentioned, or if not to you guys, the other guys, that Chris Howard turned up at the club a couple of weeks later, and said, I bought this for you and put me it was actually a UVK6, although it looks identical. Apart from the UVK6 is bright orange. He said, there you go, it's an ICQ radio, it's orange. So that one's going to live as a standard VHF, UHF, and the one I bought to play with and do all sorts of funny things with will get various firmware put in it as I play a bit more. Right, other things. Well, the smart radio we've been doing, which stands for Saturday Morning Amateur Radio Time here in the UK, the pilot, 2 weeks ago it got cancelled, out of my control, unfortunately. What happened was the library closed for maintenance work, and unfortunately I lost one of the sessions. We have a session this Saturday, and I've tried to give it a theme this Saturday of space. And we're hoping to get people along for that. I really do hope we start getting more people along. I have done some operating, fairly a bit from the car, because I've been out and about in the car quite a bit recently. And I've done some on the talk group. And Chris Howard, M0TCH, and myself were having a little chat this morning on the talk group fairly early, before 8 o'clock in the UK. And we had a VK come up. Paul, VK4 DPC, came up and he said hi. We were chatting to him for a second. He said, oh, actually, I'm not in Australia. He said, I'm in South Africa. I'm using the smartphone and the app that you can use on the smartphone. So, it can be done. It can be done. And as I say, don't have to have a radio necessary. As long as you've got a call sign and a valid DMR ID, you can join us, which was good. I'd been threatening to make this antenna, and Ed sort of half ragged me for it, and dead right, you were dead right, Ed. I've been meaning to make a vertical antenna, and all I required was to cut the right lengths of wire, attach them to my 9-to-1 balun, and put it on a pole. And Monday, I decided eventually I was going to get round to doing this. And I'd done crimped the eyelets onto the ends of the bit of wire and all the bits and pieces I had to do, connected it to my roach pole, connected up the feeder to the 9-to-1 balun, and walked away from my patio table and didn't realise that the coax cable had wrapped itself round my MFJ network analyzer that I've had 20 years. And I will tell you, it was in a padded case, but when it dropped from 3 feet onto paving tiles, it didn't work. It powered up, and all it would say was increase the frequency. Unfortunately, I got very worried and I put it all away. I stopped and had a look at it yesterday, took it apart, and found that what had happened is when it dropped and hit the floor, 2 of the PCBs moved, and a ribbon cable which connects the two PCBs together got severed on a screw. So took me longer to repair it than it did to find the fault. About 10 minutes to find the fault and about 2 hours to get it apart and bits and pieces. But it works now, and I'm really pleased. That's probably the best win I've had this week. So, that one's done and dusted. So, all being all, that's what I've been up to in the hobby. So, all that's left for me to do now, boys, is thank you for turning up and carry on with the rest of the podcast. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you as always, Dan. I'd like to thank Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT.
Thank you, Martin. Always a good time.
Yeah, we had great fun. And I'm getting better at this, Caryn, because I get your call sign right most of the time now. And back in the UK, Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
No problems, Edmund. And last but not least, Ed Durrant there over in Germany, who is getting quite late for you now, but thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for the invite, and talk again in 4 weeks' time.
We will do. So 73, guys, and we'll catch you again soon.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with news in the States where there's been amendments have been made to the amateur extra class question pool that will be in effect between this year, 2024, and through to 2028. The amendments are basically minor question changes. There's a removal of one question, a graph's been modified, etc. So just really an update to this question poll for the amateur extra class US exam. And as I say, this now can be downloaded from the NCVEC's website at ncvec.org. So well worth checking it out, because that question pool comes into effect from the 1st of July and might say be positive for you if you're looking to take the exam second half of the year. If you're an amateur in North America, you might be able to help out with a club in Cleveland, Ohio. The Case Amateur Radio Club, Whiskey 8 Echo Delta Uniform, are looking for help from amateurs for the solar eclipse and the project they'll be running. So this solar eclipse will be taking place on the 8th of April. And they're looking to recruit North American amateur stations interested in recording the Canadian Time Standard Station for 2 weeks surrounding the eclipse. Anyone with a Kiwi SDR or a rig that can interface with analysis and recording software such as Fiji is encouraged to reach out and to participate. So we'll put all the details to get involved on the ICQ podcast webpage, but this might be a great way of getting involved with this solar eclipse, which it looks like it's going to cover the whole of North America from Canada all the way down to Mexico, so it could be a great event to get involved in. Right, now we head over to our features episode, which is your questions, our answers. Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Well, everybody, for this episode's feature, for episode 424, we thought we'd do a roundup of some of the feedback we had recently. It's always great to hear from you guys and what you're feeling in the hobby and what we're doing, etc. And as I say, certainly understanding what's going on. So we got some very interesting feedback in this episode, and we thought we'd take a moment to discuss what you guys have been up to and your thoughts, etc. So we start off with a comment from Dave, Golf 4 Uniform Foxtrot Sierra. And Dave commented upon a recent news story we covered about the first amateur radio in space, Juliet Sierra 1 Yankee Mike Golf. Now, Dave mentions, I understand telemetry encoding methods were not published and considerable work has been done to try and understand the meaning of this data. If this is so, can this be considered to be the first ham radio station on the moon? Surely this is just an organisation using amateur radio assigned frequencies for its telemetry and therefore technically a pirate. My license tells me I cannot send messages in any cipher. At the very least, this transmitter is in breach of the spirit of that clause. As a question there. So, interesting talk there from Dave. And as I say, Dad, what's your take on some of those points there? Certainly in relation to sending, say, the cipher messages and whether or not this might be a breach of licensing regulation.
Yeah, interesting what Dave has to say. The thing is, and Dave's right, if you take the UK specifically, but other parts of the world potentially could be allowing ciphers. There is encryption on a lot of the radios now you buy. It's already in there. You just have to switch it on. It was an interesting one because, let's face it, it's the first time that they've dropped something on the moon that's transmitting data back on amateur frequencies, and it was worth giving it a try. Now, maybe we can't do this one, but the next one up there, maybe it'll last longer, and maybe it'll end up being an amateur radio repeater. And that, in fairness, is going to be a good thing. I think, yes, they're on amateur frequencies, but it does depend on the Japan, what the licensing agreement and what the people in Japan agreed to do. So, difficult one. Our band plans are different to the States and different to other countries. So, yes, David, I agree. From a UK point of view, we probably shouldn't be having a go at this one. But I just thought it was interesting when we raised it in the podcast that, this is something new. This is something that's being moved forward. And it's like the Qatar government that put up the geostationary satellite and then allowed us to use a certain amount of bandwidth on that and frequencies. Things are moving on, and this, I think, was an interesting one to find out if maybe some of this is possible. What do you think, Colin?
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity for more of this type of launch. I suppose there is a lot of talk in North America about NASA using private companies and payloads to the States, and so it's payloads up to the moon, etc., and how they're looking at private companies to fund future space journeys. With the refueling the International Space Station or potentially going back to the moon. So maybe it's one where, as you say, this could be a very localized deployment. And maybe some of the ones in the future could be a lot more open, as I say, and opening up that opportunity where, as I say, a local breach won't need to be done to work such a station, because there'll be a bit more openness going forward, as you say, for now. But I do think there could be an explosion in these type of I suppose, access over the coming years as say more and more payloads are being sent upwards. It would give us an opportunity to maybe have something a lot more open. So I suppose it's a watch this space type of thing, in my opinion, and just hope that, as I say, we can invigorate people to work those stations in the meantime. Maybe at the very least, though, this one, it might be a case of that while we can't send messages, as I say, potentially listening in and seeing the development on the technology side will help us in the future.
Yeah, and the other thing is, for this one, it was only going to be there for a short period of time. If you could receive this thing, it was trying to get you used to be saying, well, can we receive it from the ground here? That sort of thing. The other thing is, and nicely, is, and I respect David's opinion on this one. We as a podcast discuss these things. There's no right or wrong answer. But I'm great David's put the effort to put pen to paper and let us know that at least he feels strongly about it. And, I'm perfectly open with all this. The podcasters' opinions are their opinions. And I kind of like trying to think that our hobby is moving forward in the 21st century. as it does now quite well, Colin.
Yep, certainly so, certainly so. Okay, right, we're going to head from the UK now to the States, and we're going to head to the state of New York, where our friend Winston Lawrence has dropped us a line to tell us about a installation of a new solar edge optimizers that is installed for, say, a solar power installation. And the good news is there's no interference on the panels. Now, he's written up a blog post on this of the installation and the test results, etc., which we'll pop in the show notes on this episode on the ICQ podcast webpage. And this is potentially a great opportunity here to have a look at an installation of, say, solar panels, which aren't going to cause interference after a lot of the news stories recently about problems about the interference.
Yeah, this is interesting, and I haven't spoken to Winston for a few weeks. He's often up on the talk group, the ICQ podcast talk group, digital talk group. But this is the kind of thing I think solar panels and their controllers got a terrible press very early on. We're now probably about 10 years into using this technology, and I think that A, the technology has improved, and B, the people that produce rubbish, noisy ones have been caught out. And it's, I think that now we're starting to find things that actually work much, much better. It's a bit like the 12 volts to 240 volt or 110 volt in the States inverters, which you plug on your car battery and have mains voltage. The original ones of those were as noisy as anything, made all sorts of noises, horrible waves come out of them, did all sorts of bits and pieces. Nowadays, most of them, if not all, are pretty much clean. And, people are realizing that they can't get away with the really bad ones because they get found out. And once they get found out, the bad publicity they get, because bearing in mind social media these days, if you start complaining about something now, within about 10 minutes, 90% of the world knows about it. So I think, not only is it a publicity thing, but I think people are starting to realise that they can't just put rubbish out, and the newer ones have to obey the rules that the FCC in America and the Ofcom and other regulators around the world have set down. And if they fail at that, they could be up for fines, which certainly happened in the States there. So, new technology, we're not promoting this particular system that Winston's put in, but if you're interested, it makes very interesting reading. Back to you, Colin.
Yeah, and I think that the things well, which would be very great for, and you'll see the write-up for you, loads of technical data on this for you to have a look at. So, say if it's something you're interested in and looking to explore into, I say there's a lot of information there from Winston. So, thanks a lot for that write-up, and also Winston, thank you very much for your continued support of the ICQ podcast. It is greatly appreciated. So from Winston, we go to another one of our kind supporters, Sandip Nambar, who contacted us from a recent show where we did a feature on more workshop tips. And he thanks you, Dad, for your tribal knowledge. He's noted down his Remember Journal because I tend to remember something written down rather than something simply heard. So 72 from Sandip, EI7, India, Juliet, Bravo. And that got me thinking, Dad, it's, and we were just talking about this as we were setting up this record for this feature, is, I say, these repository areas that, it's good to, I suppose, cut and paste and keep all these ideas in something like a journal, I suppose a OneNote, dump file on your desktop, whatever it be, to have these types of tips and tricks to review over regularly, because there's a lot of these systems that do say if you have it in front of you and you're constantly reviewing it, that it stays in your memory bank more than just to say, reading it once and then forgetting about it, or it goes from there. And Sandip's way of, as I say, jotting these tips down for potential future use is a great idea.
Yeah, I think Sanjit's done a good one on this. Yeah, the tips and tricks I sometimes put out, I feel sometimes that they may be a bit basic, but in many ways, Colin and I get more feedback on the tips and tricks episodes than most. And when I talk to people on the talk group, they say, "Oh, that was a good tip. Oh, that was good. Or I didn't know that." And I think the thing is, and us at the podcast are very much along these lines, knowledge should be shared. If I know how to do something, I don't think I'm much more powerful than you by not telling you. I think that the important thing is we should share knowledge, make our lives easy, and as we go forward, do things. And I've not been a designer, in fairness, but I've been a Mr. Fixer. I've had late nights on computer sites or radio sites fixing things which have gone wrong. And some of these tips come from that. They're real practical ones. I sometimes wonder that you might think I'm being a bit basic at times, but usually people come back and go, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that." So some of the best YouTube videos I watch are the ones that always give me a good tip. And yeah, I hope we'll do more, Sanjit. But I hope we'll do more on these, and as the time goes on, because I would like to have some of the things documented, Colin.
Yeah, I mean, look, as you said as well, some of the feedback, I mean, it's twofold, isn't it? A, it's like, "Oh my God, that's a great tip." And, you can sometimes think, "Oh, it's so easy," but people don't think about it. I think the other one, it makes me smile, to people say, "Wow, I've forgotten about that one." I'd forgotten about that one, and that's such a simple way of doing X or Y or Z. And as you say, sometimes just resharing that knowledge is a great way of doing things. So no, and as I say, Sandip's idea of getting them recorded down so they're there for you to cast an eye over whenever you need them, I think is a perfect way of keeping, say, that knowledge up to date and fresh in his memory as well. So yeah, and that certainly sounds like a great idea from there. Okay, we're heading now to Canada, and Michel LeBlanc pops us a mail, and he's telling us that in Ottawa, there is a potential for SDR technology to be banned, as they're looking at say, another type of technology, Flipper, to ban, and they're sort of wrapping SDR up in the same process. Now, the way the law is being potentially written, anyone in breach of this regulation could face between 25 years to life in prison for possession or transporting that technology into Canada. Now, Mr. says the fact most US flights to Europe fly over Canada. It is referring to SDR in general terms without specifics, so it will cover almost all technology. And if passed under the Canada, United States, and Mexico FTA, which, if I remember rightly, is their sort of their collective trade bargaining, a bit like the EU's collective regulations, it will mean that the ban will then also be passed out across the United States and Mexico. This sounds like it's going to be one of those ones where it's a really bad thought out, all-compassing sort of scope on things, and we certainly see there could be a lot of issues in this across the board if the lawmakers aren't educated to potentially where this one goes.
Well, Colin, the first thing I did when I saw this one was check the date. It's not April the 1st, so it's not an April Fool's. However, if Canada ever decided to do this, they might as well go and live in caves and go back to the Stone Age, because SDR technology now is with us. It's in planes, in everything we do, or most of the new modern radios that are coming out are SDRs. Yeah, and it's for a reason. For a reason that a properly designed SDR radio works much better than the old style radio. It's cheaper to manufacture, and you can do far more with it. So I cannot see this. I mean, okay, so if Canada, the States, and Mexico did this, you effectively put Canada, Mexico, and the States in the Stone Age. And truthfully, I can't see this happening, Colin. I really can't. But Misha, good point you write up. I think the person who's putting this together needs to be taken aside and very politely explained that they're talking out their left ear, putting it politely, and what they're talking about is total rubbish. They need to understand what they need to do on this one and drop this altogether, this ban, because it's totally stupid in my opinion. What do you think, Colin?
I don't think I could add anything more to that. It does sound like it's a very poorly designed law. We see so much of this in life now, don't we? You know, be it be procedures, software, EULAs, laws, whatever it be, that just seems to be so badly written by people who don't know and don't understand what they're writing laws for and the effect that it can have. As you say, it's just so much that it would potentially affect that I can't see once, in essence, the lobbyists get involved. I can see this being restructured and sort of gone from there. But it is a very important fact, though, and this goes back to our national organisations, our people, representatives, etc., our collective groups, and why it's so important, the fact that we have strong representation from our national bodies and to I suppose educate and fight these things off across the board. So really hope that the various national bodies get involved in this, and say all the various lobby groups from the non-amateur radio world get involved as well, and explain to our friends in Ottawa in the law making part of the local government area there, or the regional government, why this one's not a particularly smart idea. So fingers crossed they will get to the right decision, shall we say, with a little bit of education.
Well, I didn't say it, but maybe I ought to. This sounds to me like the people in Ottawa have been getting to talk to the people in the UK who think 5G cellular phones is killing their cats. And you can't have a 5G mast and they're walking around with tinfoil hats on. You know, this to me is total rubbish.
True, but those people are usually also the people who've got 5G mobile phones in their pockets as well, which always makes me smile when I see that one. But well, you know, what can you do, those people? Okay, last one we're going to talk to here, and as I say, ICQ podcast is not only an audio show every fortnight, but we also have a collection of videos and interviews, etc., on YouTube that you can go and peruse at your enjoyment, and you can see our radio faces in the flesh and realise why we do an audio show. But we did a recording of a talk we done about 12 months ago now, Dad, if I remember rightly, about the birth of the ICQ podcast amateur radio talk group. And Clive Ramsey has seen the video and pops a mail on it for us. And he bases about the two sides of amateur radio, obviously the communication and the technical development side. And construction has become less possible these days, but there's always so much going done. In a world where WhatsApp, text, and images from Malaysia seems to get interrupted by calls from Nepal for free, it's hard to excite young people with SSB. He said, so hence conference calls, digital talk groups, etc. are become more exciting and interesting way to communicate. And while digital radio is so important to open up the amateur radio hobby to a massive market. So thank you, Clive, for that very kind feedback about what we're trying to do with the ICQ podcast digital talk group. And as I say, it really echoes a lot of what the reasoning behind it was. That is the fact that it is technically all radio and all communicating with a radio. Sometimes you can't do things a certain way, but it doesn't mean you can't pivot and try something else. And as I say, do and communicate across different channels and different methods in our hobby.
Yeah, it certainly does. And, in fairness, we set up the digital voice group to aid youngsters who are coming into the hobby because they understand this digital stuff. They've been used to it. The other thing is it actually does work pretty well when you do demonstrations. There we were a few weeks ago doing our smart library demonstration, and we had a gentleman call into the talk group from Brazil. So South London to Brazil, and the people in the room were like, you're talking to South London on that walkie-talkie or handy-talkie? And I went, yeah, but it is going via a repeater. And you explain what a repeater is. I don't tell them initially about baby hotspots and it only going maybe 20, 30 feet. I tell them it's going through a repeater, which is internet connected. And you get quite an interesting look on people's faces. And as time goes on, it's a way of getting people that are interested in digital stuff into the hobby. Once they're in the hobby, the chances are they'll move into the more stable or original way of doing it. And everybody will be happy, Colin.
Yep, and as I say, it is that thing for now. So look, it's thank you very much for that feedback. I really do appreciate it. If you'd like to catch up on those videos, you can find them at youtube.com/ICQ podcast. If you'd like to drop us back your feedback on anything you've heard on the show or as I say from this feature, a very easy way of doing it. You just go to the ICQ podcast webpage and click on the contact us button. There's a way of dropping us mail, or you can add your comment to various news stories, etc., that we have from there. You can do that either by text or by audio, and it's always great to hear your thoughts on what you're doing in the hobby from there. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this slightly different feature than we normally have, and the things that we're all doing in our hobby. And as always, we hope it lights some passion and some enjoyment in what we do. It'd be great to hear about what you're doing in the future, won't it, Dad?
Yeah, it certainly is. And, it is nice when you put pen to paper, but equally, we probably take far more feedback when we attend rallies and we spend time with people. I mean, I was at the Canvey Island rally for about 4 weeks ago now, and I was busy chatting to people all the time. Now, I enjoy it, and I'm passionate about our hobby, and I'm interested in what others are doing, and I thought it was great. But, people come and talk to us, and it is great to get feedback. If you don't put pen and paper together, it's also great to get feedback verbally when we're at the rallies and shows.
Yep, so we'll look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks a lot, guys.
The ICQ Podcast Digital Voice Talk Group. Your digital home away from home. Worldwide.
Well, as always, we really hope you've enjoyed episode 424 of the ICQ podcast, and we've generated you lots of thoughts and sort of passion for our hobby, which is what we're always trying to achieve here. Well, as always, we'd like to thank our annual monthly subscription donors for helping us along our way and paying our way. And if you found value from today's show, we'd ask you to consider visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. And as I say, send us some financial value back to us to help us continue the work that we do here at the ICQ podcast. We'd like to thank our very kind contributors for giving up their time for taking part in the news roundtable. So that's Dan at KB6 November Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa. Many thanks for your time and your opinions and your thoughts and expertise. So many thanks, guys, for being involved there. And just echo our feature, we'd love to hear more from you guys. You can get involved via all the usual channels, so contact us on the social media channels, via our website, etc. Feel free to get in contact with us, and we'd love to hear from you. Well, that just wraps up this episode 424 of your ICQ podcast. We'll look forward to catching up again in a fortnight's time. Continue to enjoy the hobby. 73's all.